We did have high-level milestones. We had things like system CDR, which sounds like something that's very clear and everyone understands, but there's a lot of different fidelities or ways you can define what a CDR is all about. So initially, we asked when we were documenting the milestones that the companies would provide us with a definition of a CDR. If they didn't have a definition for a CDR in their own company documentation, then I offered and provided them with what the language is in the NASA standards for what a CDR would be. And so they looked at, and we agreed on pieces of that definition and put that down in the milestone agreement, or in the Space Act as to what the milestone would be. Leading up to it, however, I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to sit back and just show up at CDR and see what happened and whether or not they would meet all our expectations. We sat down with them months ahead of time, weeks ahead of time, and walked through in very, very detailed perspective what our typical expectations are, and shared with them and talked to them about what their plans were, and where we had agreements and disagreements on what we were expecting. When a document, say, as part of a CDR, you have to produce things like a logistics plan. Well, what does the logistics plan look like? What are the kind of things you put in that kind of a plan? So we would show them and talk to them about what those plans are, what the designs are, what the design fidelity expectations are, and sit down with them really months ahead of time, so that by the time we got to the actual event at the CDR, it was pretty well, very clearly established what criteria was, whether they would met that, and whether they were really going to be successful or not. That communication was really key to the whole activity in my mind. I started out from day one feeling that we needed to build a level of communication that was very close. We'd have a significant amount of trust, and that if I said something, that they would believe that was the way it was going to be. And so when we get to a milestone, if I said 2 months ahead of time, if you do X, when we got to the milestone, if they had achieved X, then we would agree. Then that's what the intent was. So that was building that trust early, and having those early communication pieces were really key to all of our milestone activities, or not all the activities in the entire agreement. I think you need to have enough milestones to be able to measure progress. For me, that seemed to be about the comfort level was about 1 a quarter. Anything more than we were continually evaluating, and if you try to do it monthly, then you were continually evaluating a milestone, even as they were getting ready to drop the next one, and that really got into a mode where all we were ever doing was trying to evaluate milestones, and we became more of an accounting effort and less a technical effort. So once a quarter gave us an opportunity to put meaningful amounts of money out there, so the company could achieve a milestone, and then also we would have opportunities to plan for the milestone, plan for what was going to happen this quarter and the next quarter, watch them execute, and support their efforts wherever we could, and then also have an opportunity to look at what they've done and whether or not they've met the intent of the milestone. One of the key pieces I think we got into was how do we write an effective milestone? It needed to be something that was concrete, something you understood, something that was easily understood and written down. So something like a building an assembly, that was something that would naturally seem like it would be a good thing to do, and it would be measurable, and you've shown progress towards achieving your goal. But you need to also write down, what was that assembly? What's the level of the assembly? If it was a first stage of a rocket, what was the intent? How well defined was it? Is it be flight hardware? Could it be qual hardware involved? Could they be doing fit checks? You need to make sure that we had it clearly defined what our expectations were, and that the company understood those expectations when they signed the agreement. Needed to give ourselves some flexibility. We ran into issues with Orbital Sciences, and that one of their milestones was the first stage assembly complete on the Antares rocket. Well, as they evolved their evolution of how they built the Antares rocket, they actually changed the flow of how the first stage and upper stage were mated and put together, and it didn't make any sense. They were actually going to be putting on portions of the second stage before they were really finished with the first stage. It didn't make any sense in our mind to delay them to the first stage was completely complete until they'd actually completed the entire rocket. So we looked at what the intent was. We gave ourselves the opportunity to understand what the intent of the milestone was. We had some little flexibility in the language and how we put it together, so that we could look at the intent. We could agree with Orbital Sciences as to, okay, this was the intent of the milestone. And we didn't have to delay the payment until later. It was clear that they were making progress, and so we were able to document what we had seen. They were able to provide proper evidence that they had produced the vehicle to the level of fidelity we were expecting, and so we were able to sign that off and move forward with that, in spite of the fact that it wasn't to the letter. They actually had gone further than what we'd expected, but hadn't quite finished the complete piece of that first stage assembly complete. And that was something that we learned in Rocket Plane Kistler as well. They had a milestone that they were proposing called the mid-body assembly complete. And the further we got into the discussions as to what they meant by mid-body assembly complete, it got less and less firm and less solid on what it is that we're really completing. Because the assembly of the vehicle had them putting together portions of the vehicle and then disassembling portions of the vehicle. And that didn't make any sense to me to call something complete when you were about to completely disassemble the vehicle and put it back together again later. So we had a lot of discussions about that. We learned through that experience with our Rocket Plane Kistler, and this was all kind of coming together as they were coming to a point where it was clear to us all we needed the agreement was going to be canceled. But we learned a lot about how to work those agreements, how to work the milestones, and how to write that all down in a way that was both advantageous to us and the company. So we both clearly understood the intent of what we were doing and could agree on what we were set out to achieve at any given milestone.